going, everyone? It's Barles, and welcome back to another episode of the Weekend Report. Obviously, as you can see, we've got another special guest. We've got DC from Hatchat. DC, how you doing?
Going well, mate. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good, thank you. Bit of a big scoring week for a lot of people. Some people did obviously struggle with some bullets, so we'll get into all of that and all of the big scorers. But if you are new around here, make sure you subscribe. We're 23 away from 500, so make sure you do that. And also like the video and share it around and do all that good stuff. So let's get stuck into how we went this week. So DC, mate, how did you go in round 16?
Yeah, a bit of a up and down round. The majority of my team went really well. My midfield hit it out of the park, save for Callum Mills. Luckily, I didn't captain him, but unfortunately, I did bring in Aaron Hall, quite a few people this week, I'm sure. So that was very frustrating and probably just a bit of a lesson for me not to jump on players with bad recent injury history like that. But ended up with a 2-3-3 for the week. So still pretty...
As I said to you just before, still a big week with Hall in there. Yeah,
still pretty solid. So it's a bit frustrating because I could have moved up, I think, probably a couple of hundred spots if you sort of add a normal score on there. So probably was looking at easily 200-400. So ended up dropping about 80 spots, and I'm just inside the top 1,000, sitting at 992 currently.
Yeah, beautiful. It's always nice to stay in the top 1,000. Well, I had a massive week, 2485. So I was blessed that I didn't have any bullets. And yeah, pretty much everyone did well. My mate Taranto finally pulled through for me. Sean Darcy did well finally as well. Tom Mitchell, some guys like that. So plenty of big performers there. What did you end up doing for trades? Obviously, you brought Hall in, but what was your other trade?
Yeah, my other trade ended up being Riley O'Brien, which worked out pretty well. Yeah. For a lot of the week, I had Himmelberg coming in and then got a bit spooked with the bad weather. So that ended up being a pretty good call to switch there.
60 points, I think, in difference.
Yeah. So I think he got maybe just to a 70. So yeah, happy enough with the Rob move, but yeah, the Hall one obviously really disappointing. And yeah, I think that'll just be as I said, a lesson for me moving forward, and probably a lesson for a lot of other coaches is just don't muck around with soft tissue injuries, even if the player does have a great scoring history. It's just not worth the risk.
Yeah, and when I saw Aaron Hall off, because I was out the Crows game, obviously on my way home, I saw that he went off. I'm like, I think that could be trouble. And then it came out later. I thought it was a hamstring, but then it ended up being a quad or something. So I don't know how serious it is, but you might know exactly. Is it serious? Is it going to be like maybe the rest of the season, or do we know?
Yeah, I'm not sure personally, but I'm sure we'll get more clarity during the week. But I think you just kind of put a line through him for the rest of the year now if he's just been so unreliable, or his body has at least this year. So it's just not worth taking that risk, and his price is going to plummet on the back of that, unfortunately, as well.
Yeah, unfortunately. And then obviously a lot of people had Zorko as well. So it's, a few players getting injured really early. But no, I end up going deconing to James Cheetahs, and I don't understand if you can explain to me why he played 35% game time. Was he injured or something? Or was that just like what was the point of playing if he wasn't injured? Like 35%. I don't think I've actually ever seen that before from a player that wasn't a sub or injured. So I didn't quite get that. And then I end up going Nick Dacos out. So that was fantastic seeing him rack up 117. I went to Jack Steele. So I lost 3 points. Who would have thought I lost 3 points getting Steele in? But I got a top 8 mid for the rest of the year. So I'm pretty happy with that. And I moved up to 3109. So I was about 4.7. So I moved up about 1,600 spots. So nice. Obviously very happy with that. Clawing back from being near 10,000, I think about 5 weeks ago, just for the buys. So yeah, so let's get stuck into the games that were. So how did a few people go here? So we got Barnes was 24.78 with holes 12 on field. Bloody hell, that was wow. Into rank 955. I think early trade plans are Hall to Salem or Dacos. Is that crazy to be able to afford Rosie to Taranto or Hall to Dawson in 2 trades? We will get to that question later on. I just sort of read out your score, Barnes. We'll get into that. So I obviously previewed the Thursday night game on the weekend forecast. So, DC, is there anything of note that you want to go over from the Thursday, the Brisbane and Bulldogs game?
I mean, probably the one that stands out to me initially was Lachie Neale. I think that quite a few people were predicting maybe another lower score from him, but just shown this year that he's by and large been very, very reliable and dropping a 133 against that Dogs midfield is no small feat. Hugh McCluggage is a guy that I've been keen on for weeks, really, probably pre-buys. I think he got that injury. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he had a 140 and I think got injured the next week. And around that time, I was pretty keen on him. So I think I probably would have jumped on if he hadn't have caught the injury. But he's looking like he could be close to the top 8 sort of mid-level in this role at the moment. Getting a lot more inside time than he has historically, and his tackle numbers are kind of reflecting that. So if you're after a bit of a pod in your midfield, then I think you could go much worse than him. And then probably just the usual suspects really from the Dogs, Tunstall, Dunkley, Bont, Treloar and Libber as well. I know Jake on our podcast has been trying to tell me for the last few weeks that Libber is a top 6 forward. I keep resisting, but unusual thing for him was actually the 7 marks. I think he had 0 the week before, so I wouldn't be expecting that every week, but a nice bump for owners.
Yeah, he's been fantastic the last 4 weeks. So he's definitely got to be in that mix for those top 6 forwards now. So I think he's back fit, obviously playing full-time mid. So I think that he's not a bad shout. 2 players I want to speak about. So Bailey Dale. So he got 117. Obviously Daniel's now out for probably the better part of a month. Do you think that Bailey Dale's a player that if someone looking for a defender under 760, he's a potential option for someone to bring in?
Yeah, potentially. I think his role was already pretty nice prior to Daniel going out of the side. So I'm not sure how much of an improvement that's going to give him, but it's typically pretty consistent. I think even last year when he first moved into that role, very rarely went under 80. Probably what we've seen from him is just a lack of ceiling. I would guess that probably that 117 is close to his top score for the year, or certainly his top couple. So, but is usually pretty good for sort of an 85, 90 every week. So if you're looking for someone to just plug in at your D6, then I think you could go much worse for sure.
Yeah, no, it was his second high score, but it was his highest score, since round 6. And his first score over, that was his only second score over 110. So, yeah, he's not that obviously big guy, but maybe Daniel being out might raise that. So, and then obviously the last player probably is Jack McRae, 93. Obviously quite frustrating. Obviously just not getting those tackles and marks that we're used to. Are you still got him as a top 8 mid and he's no dramas, or is he someone that potentially is a luxury trade later in the year that you could look at moving on?
Oh, I think if you've got him, you probably just hold him because he has got a ceiling as good as any mid. We saw, was it maybe 2 weeks ago, he dropped that 140. So any guy that can do that on a given week, you want to have him or hold on to him. But yeah, he's obviously probably this year more than sort of recent years has dropped a few more sub 100 scores. As you said, the 2 marks, 3 tackles, it's just a little unusual for him. So he's a guy that I don't own. I very nearly started him like a lot of other people, and actually been kind of happy I didn't start him because I don't think he's necessarily performed what most people were expecting. But if you've got him, I don't see much of a points upgrade by moving him on to another mid. I think he's going to be close enough to that top 8 anyway.
Yeah, that's probably just me, just as a frustrated owner. Put him VC and then C last week and hasn't delivered. So for one thing's for sure, he's lost his VC and captain privileges for the time being. So, and obviously Daniel Rich and Dayne Zorko, if you guys have got them, then that is a more than likely a forced trade, as they're probably going to miss. Nathan is in the chat. Nathan says he's better than DC. So, no, Nathan, thanks for tuning in, mate.
It's an ongoing joke in our group chat of whether Whitfield is better than Short, and Whitfield obviously was this week, but for most of the year it's been Short better than Whitfield. And Jake was a big fan of Short in preseason and didn't start Whitfield. As one of the few people that didn't. So we've been trying not to let Jake's head get too big by reminding him when Whitfield is better than Short. So it hasn't happened that often. Yeah,
no, it's funny enough, all 3 of them have been disappointing in patches throughout the year. So it's just sort of like there's only a couple of, Doc's obviously clear number 1, but there's a couple of obviously defenders that are doing well. Actually, I forgot to ask before as well. I forgot to give my +3 -3. If you want to give a +3 -3 as well, that you're more than welcome to. I know obviously you got your Pig Brody and Mitch Duncan award, which you'll do on the podcast. Yeah. So my +3, I think, funny enough, speaking of this game, I'd give it to Jack Sinclair with his 140. So it was about 3 weeks ago, I had a decision between Jack Sinclair and Zach Merritt, and I went Sinclair. I know Merritt only scored 12 points less, but very happy to own Sinclair. He's just an amazing player, just in terms of fantasy and real life. And then probably -3 would have to go to. I'm not going to give it to Himmelberg. Probably. No, not Cripper. Can't get. No, I won't get him. No, probably. I'll probably go McRae just because I didn't VC 93. That's probably why. Did you want to give any?
Yeah, sure.
Any +3 or -3, or just a couple of players that you were happy with and weren't happy with this week?
Yeah, so I guess, guys, I'm not happy with. There was two that really stood out, and obviously Hall going down injured. That's probably more a -3 for myself, being getting seduced by his high ceiling, but forgetting about the body. And then Callum Mills, I think, was the other one that a lot of people copped this week.
Yeah, I didn't watch that game. What happened? Because he got 54, and I was like, he was on 17 for a lot of the first half, and I think he was on 17 at halftime. What happened?
It's just a really odd game. Like the first half, he played a lot of time on the wing. He sat behind the ball for a little bit when Essendon got a run of goals. But then the second half, I thought he was mainly in the midfield still and still struggled to score. So I think it was just one of those games. He just had a shocker where, for whatever reason, the ball would sort of bounce the other way, or the ruckman would tap it in the opposite direction. So really odd game. But I think he will bounce back. It's just bizarre to me that John Lomai insists on putting him out on a wing in particular. I understand putting him behind the ball, but why you would put him on the wing, I don't really understand that, because his real strength is his tackling and defensive pressure inside. So, really odd game. So those were the two that stood out. And then probably Connor Rosie's first half as well, that had me tearing my hair out a bit, but he flew home in the second half, managed to get to 76.
Yeah, so what? He was on, was he 17 at halftime?
Yeah, so he had about a 60-point second half. So
he did. Didn't he do that last week as well? Wasn't he on like 20 something and he ended up on an 80?
Probably not quite as bad, but so pretty good recovery from him, all things considered. In terms of my my +3s, I had quite a few score over 110, so which is probably why I haven't dropped too much. But some of the more unique guys like Titch bouncing back with a 119 was massive. I've still got Dacos. That was huge. Merritt earlier in the round as well.
Very good. Yeah.
Really good. Actually, probably the most impressive one was Whitfield in that sopping wet game. You wouldn't think that he would score that well in that style of game. So a 114 from him. He was my highest scoring defender because I had Dacos in the midfield. So, and then probably just a bit of a shout out to Riley O'Brien as well. It's always nice when you bring in a player and he dominates, even though he wasn't really up against much.
Oh, well, I was at the game, and every mark that went towards him, he clunked. He just had that night where everything was sticking. I know no Gordon Jackson obviously helps, but he just sticky hands.
He's still good. Yeah,
he was fantastic. So I'm sure we'll talk about him a little bit more when we get to that game. But with the Carlton and St Kilda game, so obviously Jack Sinclair 140. Obviously spoke about him just before. He's looking like a definite top 6 defender. Is he a potential target of you moving forward? I know he's always expensive. And then what do you think of him just throughout the year and moving forward?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's been unbelievable this year. He was actually a guy I looked at very closely in about round 2. It's the same way I brought in Jade Gresham before round 2, and I very nearly brought in Gresham and Sinclair. Yeah. And ended up doing Simkin instead of Sinclair, but Sinclair and Gresham would have been an unbelievable pair of trades. So, he's looking every bit that a top 6 defender. So if you can afford him, it seems pretty safe. I think that score he dropped last week was possibly his lowest for the year. Absolutely jump on board of him if you can.
His 3 scores under 93 this year have been at Kazadi Stadium against Port in that wet sort of slippery game, at Canberra, sort of weird ground to score at, and then the tag game. So he hasn't gone under 93 in any game since. And I think he's got 1 score under 100 in his last 6. So he's just fantastic. Jack Steele, back-to-back, obviously, tons, 114. I'm assuming you haven't grabbed him yet. Is he a target for you this week? Obviously, back-to-back 110 scores.
Yeah, he definitely is. It was him and Hall, funnily enough, that I was looking at most keenly last week, but still didn't quite work with the 2 players I had going out. So he will most likely come in this week, and funnily enough, I'll probably trade Hall to him and then move Dacos back into my back line. So, he'll definitely be a big target. And I think if anyone doesn't have him, there's no reason why you can't get him now.
Yeah, I don't know if you agree, but do you think he looks? I think he looks better in these last 2 games than he did at the start of the year. He looks like he's getting more involved in that +6 game, and just in general just looks a lot better. Would you agree?
Yeah, I didn't see the first or much of the first game he played, but which I think was a good thing because that was a stinker of a game. But I saw a bit of him in this one, and yeah, I agree. It's certainly a little bit more spread around the ground. I think that's where he really dominated last year. Yeah, he had really high tackle numbers, but actually matching that with marks was super impressive. So if he can sort of average that 5+ marks a game, I am all but certain he'll be a top 8 mid.
Yep, no, he's looking fantastic. Ron Marshall was obviously very good as well for those owners that have him. He only had 10 hitouts for that, so that was obviously very good. I think he's more a target for next year if Wright ends up retiring, and then fantastic option, I think, in the ruck. George Hill at 99, just got the job done again. So Sam Walsh and Paddy Cripps, 87 and 86, so 33 touches for Walsh and 31 for Cripps, but only no marks, 2 tackles for Walsh, 3 marks, 1 tackle for Cripps. They've got West Coast this week. If Cripps is one of your worst players in team, so this is a question sort of I've got as well. Cripps is probably in my bottom 3 players at the moment. Even with West Coast, is he an option that you could still potentially look at moving on? And what do you think of Walsh as a potential option moving forward? So more those 2 players.
Yeah, I think you could jump off Cripps, particularly because he's still quite highly owned. So if you're pushing for a hat or sort of a particularly high rank and you want to go a bit more unique, then you could definitely jump off him. I don't think he's going to be a top 8 mid. Walsh could be a top 8 mid, but he strikes me as one of those guys who needs to play very, very well to put up huge scores. Will typically get more of the ball and worry less about tackling and sort of the cheap marks, but it's obviously, brilliant around stoppage and runs all day. So, it could be a top 8 mid, but I wouldn't be chasing him necessarily at the moment by any means.
Yeah, I don't think that Walsh has got that same ceiling that he did like last year when he was that inside mid playing a lot of CBAs. But my fingers are crossed he gets forward status. I don't know exactly what he would be. I think he'd be around the mark, but I don't know if he'd be above. But that's just obviously something to watch for people that have got Walsh as well. Obviously, Doherty as well, disappointing, but he did cop a lot of attention from, what's his name, Winhager, tagged. Hunter Clark, he's the unluckiest player I reckon I've ever seen play AFL. He just can, unfortunately, these weird incidents just keep happening to him. So he's just, I just feel sorry for him. And hopefully he can get back on the football field as soon as possible. And that was probably it from that game. So next game, Essendon Sydney. I'll let you take away this game. What was the players that impressed you and disappointed for you in this game?
Yeah, as I touched on earlier, Zach Merritt, I think, is getting close to back to his best. Did have the 3 goals to help him to get to that score, but I think still would have turned up even without that.
Yeah.
Chad Warner, I think, is a guy for the future. I've been
such a good player.
Pretty hot on him. Wasn't that far off starting him in preseason. I think he's had a few down games, but he actually hits the ton pretty frequently as well. So I think he will be almost a top 8 level mid at some point during his career. Luke Parker, even 100. He's been Mr. Consistent for me since I brought him in probably 8 or 9 weeks ago. And I think anyone that's got him would be pretty comfortable with him in their side at the moment.
Yeah, I made the bad decision of going Heaney over Parker in round 7 or 8. So, yeah.
That hurts. Parrish, 84 on return. It's going to drop a bit of cash on the back of that and the game where he got injured in. So, might be a target in a few weeks' time if you need a bit more of a mid upgrade. But, Merritt back to his best, maybe that pitches a few points off him as well. D'Ambrosio as well, 77 from a rookie.
Very
I'm sure quite a few people would have had that on the bench. So a bit of nice cash gen coming there. And then Nick Martin and Ben Hobbs, probably the other 2 rookies that people would still have. I think if you've got Martin on field, you need to try and upgrade him. I think that sort of 70 to 80 mark is probably about where he's going to be for the rest of the year. And you're probably giving up, 20, 30 points a week to premiums on him. So try and move him on if you can. And then just looking through the list, probably, Callum Mills already spoke about, really. That was just a bizarre game. And Jake Lloyd, I think, kind of showed that his 140 or whatever it was the week before was just one out of the box. I think his days of averaging 110 are well and truly behind him now.
Yeah, he just doesn't. Sydney just don't play that game anymore, where they rely on that. As I know, I love how Xavier Ellis every time on the Selby podcast always refers to him as the headless chooks. So that's pretty much what they are. Like you got McInerney and Blakey and on all those guys coming off the back line. They just like to just sort of go gun and hose through the middle. So yeah, and then obviously, was there one other? Oh, and then obviously Heaney as well, 61. If people haven't moved him on by now, you'd want to be looking at doing that now, because obviously he's just not going to be doing it for us this year. So that's pretty much it from that game. So we'll move on to the Adelaide and Melbourne game. So this was a very good game to watch, actually. I thought Crows actually played quite well for 3 and a bit quarters, and Melbourne sort of were just a better team and went away with it late. But some massive scores from here. So Christian Petrarca, 141. I would imagine that he'll be one of the most trade-in players this week, being under 800K, sorry. Clayton Oliver just continues to get it done and dominate the Crows every time we play them for some reason. Rory Laird. I want to obviously get your thoughts on Laird, because he was tagged in the first half by Harms, didn't leave his side. He was on 52 at halftime. Went absolutely massive and scored his season high score of 136. Do you see him as the number one midfielder for the rest of the way, considering his easy draw and just I think he's gone once under 118 since round 6 or something. He's just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, if he's not going to be the number one midfielder, he's definitely going to be the most consistent premium mid the way he's going. I think he's looking like a really nice fullback captain option, and I stupidly didn't captain him in this game. I ended up going Brayshaw instead, which worked out okay in the end. But
117 or something, didn't he get?
Yeah, I think he actually got to 120 in the end. So I think there was a late update. So I actually might have bumped up a few spots there as well, which is handy. But he kind of just looks as though if your VC fails, then going with Laird, as you see, is going to be a pretty safe play, and 9 tackles to help him to get to that score is very tasty.
Yeah, the only reason I didn't go him, as he was my captain all week, but I took it off him because when I saw that, obviously, when Nathan said on the Twitter space on Wednesday night about that shoulder, I'm like, I don't say I'm going to go your captain, unfortunately, because I don't like going captains that have got any risk, obviously, associated, but that's everyone else. Jordan Dawson, as I said to you guys on Twitter space as well, he said to me on Monday night he'd score 85 points. I didn't realise that he meant he'd score 85 in the first half. He got 84, but he went massive. It was actually Matty Nix's fault, the reason he didn't end up scoring a 140, because he got swung forward in the last quarter, only scored 8 points. He was on 121 at three-quarter times. That could have been massive, but yeah, that's what unfortunately is going to happen with Dawson. I think he's still going to be consistent, and he's probably a top sort of 3 or 4 defender at this moment in time, but I think he's fantastic. Obviously, O'Brien, which we spoke about before, 129. If people are looking for a ruck, is he one of the top sort of options that you'd go for?
Yeah, probably at the moment he's probably, I would say top 3 or so. With all the injury carnage we've got. So I'd probably have him, Darcy, and probably still Cameron in there at the moment. They'd be my top 3, I think.
Yeah, I think we'll speak at Cameron later, but the 83 against Wits, I think, was pretty impressive as well. Hard matchup there. Ben Keys, 123. He's quite cheap, potential option. I'd probably rather more consistent, but if people are looking for golden easy run, he's an option. Christian Salem, I know Jake would be happy. Was there one? Who was the other? Someone else from Hatchat grabbed Salem, I'm pretty sure. Who grabbed him as well?
I'm not actually sure any of us got on him in the end.
I thought
Jake may have done, but it could be wrong. We were pretty keen on him though at the time. I think maybe Sanch was the only one that wasn't particularly, but good to see him bounce back with a ton after his 60 the week before. Yeah,
so he looked good. He looked good. He didn't look like he was hampered by any knee injury. So if people are looking for a cheap defender, he is an option that can do better. Brayshaw with an 80, probably a little bit under what people would have thought he would have done against Adelaide, but I guess anything 80 plus from a defender is probably a pass mark. Jake Saligo, 73, looked impressive if people relying on him as cover. And yeah, Parnell, did he sing 59? That was probably about it from that game. But obviously, I saw a lot of people. Obviously, Luke Jackson. That was obviously the big thing. I know if a lot of people traded English down to Jackson pre-lockout, and then obviously got locked out, so they only really used one trade. So if you were obviously on it, you don't have Jackson, do you?
No, I don't in the end. No, got away with that.
Yeah, if people have got Jackson, you'd be just advising to be, if they hadn't traded out already, they'd just be a trade out with Gawn looking like to be back soon.
Yeah, I mean, probably have a look and see what the teams look like this week, I guess, first. But, if he's playing solo and Gawn misses another one, then you could probably hold him for one more week.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'd be thinking about moving him on if you don't have other issues like a Hall or a Zorko or something like that.
Yeah, no, definitely. We'll move on to the Geelong and North Melbourne game. So you can take this one if you want. So what did you like from this game and what didn't you like?
Yeah, I didn't see an awful amount of this one, but Jeremy Cameron, every now and then he has one of these sort of games where he actually not only kicks a bag, but he will rack up disposals as well. I
30
remember
disposals.
which is unbelievable for a key forward. So I remember he had a few games like that when he was at the Giants as well. And yeah, very, very good fantasy player on his day. Obviously won a car for a coach probably 4 or 5 years ago now in the final round.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, that's right. He was playing like I can't remember who he was playing in the last game, but it was an easy game. He ended up kicking like 7 or something in the final game. So
yeah, scored a 140, 150, I think. So, I mean, Luke Davies-Uniacke, he's been a guy that at various times this year I've had on my watch list. He's a bit of a tease. He'll sort of drop these big scores and then he'll drop a 60 the week after. So, I just after the Simpkin experience I had, I couldn't jump on another Kangaroos mid, but I think at some point he will be a proper premium mid. Speaking of premium mids, Cam Guthrie's been excellent the last probably 8 weeks or so.
Jump time late. I thought I remember looking at the score because I was still in the city. I'd grabbed a bite to eat after the Crows game, and I think he was on like 78 or something. He was just on track for his normal sort of base 147 points in the last quarter to get to that big 100. So if anyone did actually, I know a couple of people chucked him captain as well against North Melbourne. So if you did that, you'd be pretty happy with him. So he was very good.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that, for whatever reason, I never have the guts to jump on. But probably, at about round 5 or 6, I reckon he was maybe under 700k or at least low 700ks. Would have been a fantastic pick at that point. So,
and he only played 69% game time as well. So that's probably one reason why you don't look at him because he scores points when he's on the pitch, but he doesn't have that consistent 80% game time that we probably look for in our premium mids.
Yeah, absolutely. Mitch Duncan, 118. That might
another
be
jump
second
time again. He was on like 100 with like a minute to go.
I think.
Fantastic. He was good again.
Yeah, I mean, you could go there, but
does that probably have alarm bells of the Aaron Halls and the Zorkos, like that injury risk? Obviously,
I was just going to say the same thing. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously why
Mitch Duncan award.
Yeah, that's why we named it that, was because of his injury. So I just think those kind of over 30 guys, you are running that risk a lot more than a younger player. And he probably hasn't shown the ceiling this year that he has in the past. It'll be one of his higher scores for the year, I would say. Whereas of years gone past, he sort of drops 140s, 150s. And if you can get him at the right time, he's a great pick. So I still wouldn't go there personally, but if he's all you can get to, then, you could think about it for sure. Simpkin turned up again.
300 in a row now.
Yeah, I stupidly traded him on his buy instead of Anderson. And funnily enough, I then basically traded Anderson to Hall this week. So I've traded sort of a story of 3 North Melbourne players, and the one I should have kept was the first guy I traded out. So
good old North Melbourne.
Yeah, but he just hasn't got the ceiling at the moment. I think because the team's struggling so much. They've all been low hundreds basically. So certainly not going to be a top 8 mid, but he is fairly cheap still. I mean, obviously the Hall situation we've already spoken about. Jed Anderson, 76. I traded him this week. So if you've still got him, I would be trying to get off. He doesn't look as though he's got the right role necessarily to be close to a top 6 forward, which is unfortunate.
He was only 13 CVAs. He was behind Greenwood, Goldstein, Simpkin, and Davies-Uniacke. So he's playing. It's a little bit like that Heaney role. He's playing that mid sort of in between the stoppages and in between the forward 50. He's like just sort of ball just keeps tracking over his head. So I'd be looking to get off. Dangerfield had a good game as well, 83. I guess he's probably one that I'm looking at if next year, depending on how cheap he is and if he's right to go. But I guess 83.
Yeah, I think he falls into that category of the 30 plus guys as well. He'd have to get super, super cheap for me to think about it. And probably, certainly this year, but I think a bit of last year as well. It's just kind of showing that his body's starting to fail him a little bit as well. So I couldn't go there personally.
Yeah, 100%. Is that pretty much covered all from that game, I reckon?
I think so, yeah. That looks like most of them.
Yeah. And then we'll move on to the other Saturday night game. So Gold Coast and Collingwood. So the one player that I want to talk about a lot, I don't have him. I haven't been keen on him all year. And I know Dossie wasn't keen on him, but I think that he's back. Touk Miller, that's his 3rd score over 127 in his last 4. He just looks like, I didn't watch this game either, but I obviously heard he went off injured. late in the second quarter, but he came back on. But he just looks like he is starting to run over the ground, much like he was last year. Is he one of those top trade targets you'd be looking at? I think have you got him?
Yeah, I've got him. I actually got him in quite early, probably about maybe 5 weeks into the year. Probably got on him, a week or two before a lot of people did. But he's been good, but probably more so than kind of similar to McRae in some ways. Still got the ceiling there. He's probably hit the ceiling more regularly than McRae, but he's just dropped a few lower scores as well. So that said, if he's going to drop, a handful more 130s between now and the rest of the year, he's still going to be top 8 in my book. So.
Well, his run for the rest of the year is pretty nice as well. So if I can just grab it up here. So he'll be a tick over 900K this week, but I think that's still a good price for him. But he's got Richmond, Essendon, Brisbane, West Coast, Hawthorn, Geelong, probably the one hard game. And then he's got North Melbourne. So I think that he's got an amazing run from his end. He's my number one trade target this week. Nick Dacos, obviously got rid of him this week. But 117, is he still a guy, even though he got a 117? I know he's got a couple of good games coming. Would you still be, if he's like your worst player, would you still be upgrading him even though he scored so big? Or has he got such a nice role that you just keep rolling him until maybe he falters for another game and then maybe look to move off?
Yeah, it's a hard one. I mean, what's that? I think 3 tons in his last 4 now, maybe. Yep. And the only low score he's got in there was in that pretty wet game last week.
66 or something, yeah.
Yeah, the role is perfect, really, for what you want from a rebounding halfback. They look to feed him the ball a lot. He runs past for a lot of cheap possessions. It's actually not that dissimilar to the Aaron Hall kind of role, funnily enough. So yeah, I think you'd be pretty bold to move him on now if you've still got him. Just keep rolling him at your D6 and until he starts to become a major issue. As I said, I'd probably excuse that 60 from last week by and large.
Yeah, so I moved him on just because I thought 66, he's going to get his 25 odd possessions, but he might drop some 80s and stuff because he's not a huge marker or a huge tackler. But what sort of first year player is getting 37 touches? He's amazing talent, and he's going to be definitely a premium that we're going to have in our team, not for the final time, that's for sure. So, it wasn't a huge fancy game. Like Matt Rouse sort of got an 84, so he was sort of just did his thing again. He only got the 1 mark, so there you go. It's probably a lot of people would have been cheering when he actually took a mark. Darcy Cameron 83, so he was solid against Wits. Obviously, tough matchup. Sort of, I don't know how wet it got, but it was meant to be wet. I think it was a little bit dewy up there, but yeah, so he did his thing. Jack Crisp. So funny enough, I remember in round 3 against Geelong, he was on 41 at 3/4 time, had a 42 point last quarter, and he got to an 83. Last night, he was on 41 points 3/4 time, had a 42 point quarter, and up on 83. So he just, as consistent as they come, just gets it done every week. So I think you can probably wait a couple of weeks on him because he is getting cheap. His break-in was quite high. So I think that you can definitely wait on him. One person we probably should speak about, your mate. I know you got rid of him, but Connor Buderick, obviously got. Do you know actually what happened? How he got injured? I don't actually know what happened.
No, I missed that. So, I think that's might be almost the identical score. I think he might have been on a 66 the week he got injured for me as well. So he can't seem to get it past 70 at the moment. But definitely not one of my smartest picks this year. But I do think he has got some fantasy game. And I think if one day he gets a pure, less defensive, more attacking, more rebounding kind of role, he actually could be quite decent. But he obviously couldn't go there at the moment.
Yeah, for some reason, Stewie G puts him some games. I remember the Crows game when he did get injured. He was playing that rebounding defender, and then he was on 6-6 midway through the third quarter. He was on track for over 100, but then got injured. And then this game, this was 6-7 in pretty much whole game. So I don't know. It's like some coaches just don't let some players play in their sort of best position. So I think Buderick is a brilliant kick. So I think he's a better rebounding defender, but obviously we don't control what coaches do. Taylor Adams, 66. So if anyone was sort of still looking at him, I'd be crossing him off. Lipinski, 66. I assume people moved him on. Witt, 65. Probably disappointing after the 120 last week. So funny enough, if you brought in Darcy, he's probably been better he has been better over the 2 weeks than what, or they're about the same, but yeah, Witt's probably hasn't got the same ceiling. Hopefully Darcy Moore's okay. I saw he obviously injured his knee, so hopefully he's good. Jordan De Goey, 37. and that was in the bloody full game. So he's just definitely crossed him off. And then obviously we mentioned before James Cheetahs with 35% game time, and he wasn't injured. I just don't understand why I'd give him a debut if you're not going to play him. So yeah,
it's sort of rewinding back to 20 years ago, isn't it? When you bench players only came on in the last quarter. So
yeah. No, I don't get it, because I thought I brought him in because, and Jep said the same thing as well. Like, loves a cuddle, was doing quite well in the twos and getting a lot of touches and tackles, and then they just sort of don't even use him. So yeah, I don't get it. Moving on to the Sunday game. So did you want to do the Richmond Eagles and the Freo Port game, or do you want to do the Giants Hawthorn game? What would you like to do?
Oh, I'll do the Eagles game, seeing I'm an Eagles supporter and watch most of that one. Yeah, I mean, Tim Kelly, he's actually been pretty good this year for the Eagles. Probably one of our few mids that's played most of the games. I think he'd be up there in our best and fairest, and probably hasn't got the accolades for it in some ways because of how poor we've been. But it's always had a ceiling, just isn't consistent enough, and does rely a lot on disposals to score. But he was excellent in this game. Big score from him.
Yeah, fantastic.
Daniel Rioli was very good as well. If anyone's still rolling with him at sort of their F6 or D6.
He ended up turning out to be quite a good pick. I know Calvin obviously got him. I know a lot of people didn't get on him, but he was one of those sneaky picks that not many people went and ended up doing well. So my sneaky pick this year was actually Paddy Naish. I started with him and he ended up doing really well. I traded him out the week that he was a sub, and he was about 597, I think. And he dropped like 100K in 2 weeks. So he was a good pick. But he was, Daniel Rioli definitely sneaky pick that people went that end up being really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think if you can get those sort of pretty cheaper end mid-price guys to start the year, and they can sort of score substantially over a rookie and not that far below a premium in the first 8-10 weeks, they're gold, those picks. It's just about getting them out at the right time.
The other two, important. I think the other two were Stengel and Charlie Curnow were the good ones that end up doing well. So yeah, a couple that we missed, but that's fine. We always miss a couple every year, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the most highly owned player in this game was Short, 84. I think he was pretty good in the first half and then slowed badly in the second half. Certainly hasn't been the same player since he's moved into the midfield, which is pretty unusual. You usually see that the other way around. A player moving inside is a good thing, but he's gone the opposite way. Just doesn't get the cheap marks that he did playing off halfback. So
he's gone 300 since round 8, and Essendon round 10, and then the last 2 weeks, which were the 101 and 104. But I haven't been a fan all year. I was actually going to bring him in just after the West Coast game, and then I just couldn't end up doing it. But yeah, I don't know. Short seems like that guy every year that we think is going to be sort of top 2, and then he has a patch where he's quite lean and doesn't end up being that guy like a Sinclair or a Doherty or Dawson that's just consistent. So is he a guy that you potentially would look to be moving on at some point? Obviously, just him scoring these 80s.
Yeah, I mean, potentially the last few weeks of the year, if he's your biggest issue, because he's quite highly owned as well, you could look to jump off him. I don't think he's going to kill you with a ceiling score in that role. But I guess for what it's worth, I think he would have been clearly top couple of defenders if he was still in the halfback role, because he was absolutely flying into
he was 120s pretty much every week. 120s every week. He was doing what Doherty was doing earlier in the year. So disappointing that he got moved, but
yeah, exactly. So Liam Baker, a few people I think were keen on him this week. 83 got there late with a couple of goals as well, so probably a bit lucky to get to that.
Just a brilliant player, probably less fantasy relevant, but more just needs to get, as Jep said, needs to get paid next year. That's for sure.
Yeah, he's probably hurts himself a little bit by being too versatile, because he can play half forward, half back, or midfield. So
I said to my mate, he'd probably play ruck if you asked him, because he's just that sort of guy that just plays any role for the team, and he just does every role well. Like, there's some obviously players that just they're in that position and that's it. He's just a guy that you can just swing anywhere, and he's just a very brilliant player.
Yeah. Just looking down the list. Brady Hoff, 76. If anyone's still rolling with him on bench, another nice score from him. I think he's going to be a pretty handy scorer. Kind of looks to me a bit like the heir apparent to an Andrew Gaff, where he just racks up marks on the outside and can seemingly run all day as well. So he's put up a few nice scores, been pretty impressive for the Eagles.
Yeah.
And then Dusty Martin, not that probably that many people have got him this year, but
He was on
subbed
fire.
out. He was flying the first half,
Yeah.
and then got subbed out with hamstring awareness, apparently, in the
Why do
the
they
second
call it
half.
hamstring? Why do they call it hamstring awareness?
It's basically just hamstring tightness. So
yeah, that's what I mean. Just say hamstring. Like awareness, just sort of just sounds just a weird word to use. But
it is a weird word to use, yeah. And then a couple of lower scores that are worth mentioning. Zane True on debut, I thought was pretty impressive. Started pretty slowly, but his second half was quite good. Kicked a goal, got a handful of CBAs. It didn't look out of place at all, I thought. So,
as an Eagles fan, do you think he'll play more games? This won't be his last game?
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he's dropped next week on the back of that. I thought he added a bit. So, I think he might get a few games in there. I think his time on ground was fairly low, as you would maybe expect with a debutant. But he looks like he's got a bit. And then, funnily enough, Elliot Yeo subbed out.
And he was looking good again.
He was, he was going all right. So
Jake nearly, and what was it? Jake was forced not to get him because of a few things happened. So that's probably a thing. Yo's going to be that guy, I think, for Jake all year that's just going to keep teasing him. So
yeah, well, he's kind of very similar to the Aaron Hall lesson, I guess. Injury issues all year, lack of continuity, and then does an injury. So
it's unfortunate because he's such a good player when he's up and running. It's just he just unfortunately just keeps getting injured. It's a little bit like Luke Shuey. Luke Shuey's I think is a great player as well. Just just can't stay fit, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean both of them are quite interesting because particularly Yo was just super durable there for a number of years. Didn't miss a lot, and then has barely played a game the last 3 years. So pretty frustrating for him because I think he's close to the Eagles' best player when he's fit.
Yeah. And then obviously Gaffey, one of my boys from last year and previous years, only 55. I don't know he just doesn't look the same player anymore. I think he's just how old is he now? Yeah, 30. So it's probably
30,
probably just getting a bit game's getting a bit too fast, I think, at the moment. And then where was the other player I was going to talk about? Someone else was going to obviously have lost and Nankerv as well. If anyone had them too, they're probably guys that maybe you don't want and might want to move on. And I thought there was someone else there, but maybe I've just lost track of who I was going to talk about. So that was it from that game, I think. Oh, and Rhett Baz only got a 20 as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's playing as a key defender, really. So spent some time matched up on Jack Rewalt. So, yeah, that's going to happen with those kind of tall defenders, particularly when you've got two key forwards like Richmond do have.
Yeah, he looks a good player, though. He's definitely one for the future. It's just unfortunately for Eagles, and as an Eagles support just isn't just clicking at the moment, unfortunately. But I was very happy that won last week. I love the Eagles. Eagles are probably my number 2 team behind the Crows if I was to go for anyone, because if I was to live in anywhere other than Adelaide, it'd probably be Perth. So
nice. Cool. We're actually the scoreline probably flattered Richmond a little bit because it was within, I think, a goal.
You came right back
late in the third quarter.
Like 40 odd points at one point, and then it came back to only a couple of goals.
Yeah. So the Eagles just kind of let the Tigers get a run of goals on a couple of times, but same number of scoring shots. I think on a different day it would have been much closer. So the Eagles definitely improving. I don't think they're going to be the pushover they were in the first half of the year. So just keep that in mind, I guess, with your captaincy options and trade options and stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree. They've got some players back. Nick now obviously back helps. McGovern hopefully be back. I don't know when he'll be back, but hopefully he'll be fine and he'll be coming back. So, so we'll move on to the Giants Hawthorn game. So the first poll I'll talk about, I don't know if you know the story, DC, but so Tim Taranto, we've had a bit of an up and down relationship this year. So first 4 rounds, he went 2 120s and then the other 2 were 100s. So when someone was out, I can't remember who it was, got injured in the first 5 rounds, I end up going, okay, I could go Mills for 840 or 850, or I could go Taranto for 939, which, look, that's a dumb decision. But I thought Taranto, consistent, 105 plus average, might not actually get cheap at all for the year. And then what does he do? He hasn't scored 100 for me since. And then I held him for all 5 weeks that he was out because I couldn't trade him out because I had other forced trades. But now he's back, 125. He looked fantastic. The conditions obviously did suit him a lot. Played 87% game time, which was obviously up 15% from what he played last week. Only had the 8 CBAs, so that was behind Cornelio, Tom Green, Josh Kelly. But I'm assuming that he's probably going to be a target for you, maybe not next week, but maybe the coming weeks, and probably for a lot of other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure a lot of people will look to jump on him. Obviously, when he's fit and firing and getting midfield time, he's clearly a top 6 forward. So, yeah, much improved game. And yeah, you hit the nail on the head with his time on ground. That's the thing I was waiting to see. He's typically been a high 80s time on ground player. And last week it was apparent that they wanted to ease him back in with that lower time on ground. So, yeah, I think if you need a forward, jump on him.
Well, he's 746, and his break even, I think, was 1 point higher than what he got. So I don't know what he's going to go up or go down, but probably stay around the same price. But no, Taranto, funny enough, that could have been a lot bigger. There was, I reckon, 6 or 7 times where particularly Lockie Ash could have handballed it to him when he was free, and then Ash just kept booting it forward. So that was frustrating. But 125, I'm definitely not complaining about. Josh Kelly, another big score for him, 124. For me, I don't know what your thoughts are on Josh Kelly, but I'm not a huge fan because of the fact that Hopper's back within the next fortnight. Taranto's back. There's just so many midfielders there. Is he still a target that you'd look at, or is he a guy that you'd be probably fading now with a few other options like Tukin still coming in?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could jump on him. I don't think he's that dissimilar to a Jack McRae this year. Like Giants and Dogs are, both got very deep midfields. There's a lot of options there. Kelly has shown that he can play inside. He can play on a wing. He can play forward, kind of similar to McRae, where he gets pushed out to a wing every now and then as well. So there's just a little bit of role uncertainty there for him on any given week. But obviously he's got, a ceiling to rival any player. So, if you're after a mid, you could jump on him. I'm not sure he's a lock for a top 8 mid though. So I'd be looking maybe at other options if you haven't got a few of those bigger names like an Oliver or a Laird, for example.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is at least he's not that 910 odd K that he was. He's sort of down at 870, and he's going to go down. He's probably going to be at the same price. His break-in was about 128, so he'll stay in the same price. But obviously, one player that you own, I wish was doing well all year. Tom Mitchell, 119. He was on 120, but they took a handball away. Bloody pricks. I wish they bloody kept the handball on. But he had 13 CBAs. So how many was that? So you had, just trying to look at the rucks here. So Kaczynski was there. So 3, and then Reeves. So there's 22 CBAs. He went to 13. So he's essentially getting that just over 50-50 split. Conditions did obviously suit him. And the next 3 games he's got, Adelaide, North Melbourne, and Hawthorn. So, sorry, not Hawthorn. Adelaide, North Melbourne, West Coast. Sorry. Is he a guy that people could look to jump on, or is he a guy that if you got him, you hold him, and obviously for the next 3 weeks, but probably don't target?
Yeah, tough one. I'm not sure I'd be targeting him, just with, again, a little bit of that role uncertainty. I actually think some of the talk about his role has been a bit overblown because he is still around the ball a lot.
He plays as that high half forward that comes up to the contest.
Yeah, and pushing into the contest, like a little bit like a Sam Walsh is doing. So, I actually think he's just been a bit out of form, and a few of the games haven't really suited him because of the speed of the game. But when the game slows down like this, and there's more stoppages, he goes to work. So it was good to see more kicks and handballs from him as well. He's typically been a bit handball happy this year. So I think with the wetter game, he just threw it on the boot a bit more, and maybe that's something he needs to start doing in some dry games as well. But yeah, really, really nice to see him drop a pretty big score.
Well, the funny thing is, since round 6 it was, he's only gone under 100 on 3 occasions, and the 3 occasions were against Essendon with the 51 when he was sick. Obviously, had gastro or something throughout the whole week. Obviously, wasn't going to score well there. And then against Fremantle with the 70 and 81 against the Bulldogs, which are 2 of the... I know Bulldogs are the hardest. I think Freo are one of the top sort of 2 or 3 hardest. So he has been still he's been solid, but maybe just not that sort of that 115, 120 that we've sort of come to expect. What do you predict he probably averages from here? Like that 105, around that mark?
Yeah, I'd probably pin him in about that. Yep.
Yeah. But no, definitely hold on. Hopefully he can go big over these next 3 weeks. Stephen Cannelio, he's probably almost in career best form, to be honest. He just looks fantastic, covering the ground so well. Is that 600s in a row or 500s in a row or something? He's been going obviously very, very well.
Yep.
He's gone from being that sort of, he was a mid-80s guy just before the coach. At lowest point he's averaging 84 and he's now up to averaging 97.7. He's definitely a top 6 forward. Would you have him as a top sort of 3? Would you have him probably at number 2 or 3, somewhere around there?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, he'd be probably the top forward, I would say, on form.
Yeah.
But yeah, certainly from now to the end of the season, I'd probably have him top 3 in that role. Yeah.
Yeah, and he'll be over 850k next week. So if people haven't jumped on him, it's just a good idea just to jump on him, I think. So Whitfield, late update as well with 6 points, which was 6 points, which was nice to get 114. So he's still a target for people looking at an underpriced defender. Good old Flinney got 100. So if anyone did jump on him, then you'd be pretty happy with that. Callum Brown looks like a really good player with 4 goals. He got a 96. Actually, is he basement price or 214
price, I think?
Yeah, what was his break even? 28. So is he a target that someone can maybe look at as a bench option as a defender forward?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you need a downgrade there and you haven't, particularly if you've got red dots on your bench and you need some cover, pretty good option by the looks of it. He'll definitely keep his spot after that.
Yeah, no, it looks like a good player. Now, so James Sicily, so he got an 81. Obviously, conditions did not suit him at all, but if you remove that, he has been obviously a bit quiet since round 8. So he's gone 2 scores over 100 with a 109 in round 9 and 100 against Fremantle around 13. But since then, he's got a lot of 80s in there. He's got, obviously, Adelaide, West Coast, North Melbourne, his next 3. Is he a guy that you would be happy to move on regardless of easy matchups? Or is he a guy that you think with easy matchups, you probably just hold and then look to move on maybe after?
Yeah, tricky one. I mean, he's highly owned, which sort of adds another variable in there as well. So if you are looking to make up ground and you want to roll the dice and you think you might drop a few more 80s on the trot, you might be able to get a 20-point upgrade on him over those periods. But I would expect against some of those weaker teams that they will probably control the ball pretty well across their half back line. So maybe he does get a bit more cheap ball. Obviously, this game was torrential, so yeah, I actually think he did pretty well to get to that score.
Yeah. And he gave away like 4 free kicks as well, so that could have been easy 90 plus. So
yeah. So I don't think he's a long way off the top 6, but it's just probably the ownership is the key thing for me because he's going to be close to 100% owned in the top, certainly in the top 100 and probably pretty similar in the top 1,000.
Yeah, well, I'll pose a quick question to you actually because I've got Doc, Dawson, Sinclair, Crisp, Hewitt, Sicily, and Whitfield, right? So I've got Whitfield in my midfield. Would you trade Sicily or Cripps? Would you move Whitfield back to defence and just have Whitfield as your D6, or would you trade Cripps? What do you reckon you go there?
I think Cripps will probably score more for the rest of the year, but yeah, that flexibility of having the extra defender isn't the worst thing. So
yeah, and with the easy matchups coming up.
Yeah, so if Sicily drops a couple of tons in a row with those easy matchups, you don't want to be trading him out. So I'd probably move on Cripps first, I think.
Yes, yeah. I was thinking leaning towards Cripps as well because he's getting 30 disposals, but he's just not having those tackles and those goals that he was at the start of the year to be that 120 guy. Tom Green got an 81. If anyone's still rolling with him, Jacob Ware. Can you believe 3 weeks in a row he scored exactly 67 points?
To know that. It's good.
It's really weird. And all his games, actually, funny enough, in his last 5 games, he's played 6 games. So he went 58 in his first game. But since then, 64, 72, 67, 67, 67. So he's probably averaging about 67 over that whole run. So just really a really weird stat. When he was on 67 again, so I'm like, hang on, I swear I've seen him on that like so many times. But yeah, so Himmelberg, very similar to Sicily, like you said. I think it was actually quite good that he got to a 66 in the end because it was obviously not conditions. But I think he still has that role. Would you be a hold for him, seeing as he still does have that role?
Yeah, definitely. If you've got him, definitely hold him. I'm actually still not ruling him out as an option if you don't as well, because I think that will slow his price rise a little bit. What we've seen on any given week, he can drop a huge score. So, yeah, I think for any of those players that rely heavily on marks, I would give them a pass on this game, or a free pass, I should say. So, yeah, again, that was probably about what I was expecting, really.
Yeah, and he was same with Sicily as well. I think he ended up giving away like 4 free kicks as well. We Himmelberg, yeah, 3. So again, that could have been a 70 plus, which probably looks a little bit better. But yeah, I'm definitely holding. Do you think he's a top 6 forward for rest of the year if he stays in this role?
I think he'll go close. Yeah, as long as he's not playing in too many super wet games like that one. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that was ridiculous. Yeah, it was just so wet. Like, yeah, you don't see too many games like that, but yeah, I think he did okay to get 6-6. And then Sam Butler as well with a 33. If people got him on the bench, he's just not making any more money. So he's probably not too expensive enough to even get rid of. So he's probably just a guy you just keep there for the rest of the year. So final game, take it away. Fremantle on Port Adelaide. Very good game this actually. Port come back right at the end.
it was. Yeah, as a West Coast supporter, I was hoping Port were going to creep over the line, but they blew a few chances late.
Yeah.
Andy Brayshaw, I was a bit worried that I was going to have the 2 lowest scores in my midfield as my VC and C, but he flew home with a 44-point final quarter.
He's just amazing. He just does it. Just gets it
Yeah,
done.
incredible fantasy player. Didn't have a mark in this game as well, which is very unusual for him. He usually scores a lot of his points through that. So
The thing
11 tackles.
Yeah, the thing I've been impressed with him the most this year is obviously he's taking his game to a new level. He's now he has been for probably 2 years, but he's an elite midfielder now. Obviously, just a two-way runner. But the thing that impressed me the most is he's been tagged 4 times this year, and he hasn't gone under 80 in any of the games he's been tagged, and he's got a couple of hundreds as well. So he got sort of closely monitored by Drill. I wouldn't say like a heavy tag, but he was sort of been following around all the game. Good. Here's a question to you, Brayshaw. Well, I've got Laird, but for people out there, I think a few people might want to know Laird or Brayshaw. Who are you picking?
If you don't have them,
Yeah,
probably still
very close.
Yeah, it is very close. Probably depends on the price difference. I think Laird will be a bit more expensive this week, but I mean, Brayshaw's shown that he's probably got the highest ceiling this year, but Laird's been more consistent. So it probably just depends on what the rest of your team looks like. I think Laird's got the better run, so maybe you lean that way.
Yeah, so like they're literally neck and neck. Laird won 16.1 average, Brayshaw won 15.9. So you just need definitely both by the end of the year. But as a Laird lover and favourite player in the AFL, it does make me very happy. I didn't see him averaging 116. I know he's a fantastic player, but I didn't see him doing this well. So yeah.
Yeah, so keep moving down the list. Ollie Wines bounced back to a bit of form, 39 disposals, had 29 handballs.
29.
Which is a lot, but yeah, what
Looked
112 for him. Yeah,
he looked a lot better.
Pretty good bounce back. That's why you kind of hold those kind of guys, similar to Titch as well, where he's had a few down weeks, and their scoring history, if the role isn't hugely different, then eventually they do bounce back. Speaking of bounce backs, Sean Darcy, 107 after a pretty disappointing game last week against De Koning. I thought relied a lot on hit-outs to score, but had the 21 disposals this week, which was definitely needed, and a couple of extra marks in there as well. So
I was a bit worried about him. Yeah, I was a bit worried about him at quarter time. He's only on 15 points or something like that, I think, but he ended up having a pretty good sort of last 3 quarters.
Yeah. So yeah, I think he'll be close enough to a top 2 ruck, and he's still fairly well priced, I think. Will Brodie, my least favourite player in the AFL now, because it was a shocking trade to move him on.
Who did I remember you saying you moved him on? Who did you move him on instead of?
So I moved him on to be able to get up to Gawn, which was basically
that's right. Yeah.
So yeah, if I could go back and change one trade, that would be it. And good lesson about not paying top dollar for guys, particularly in the first half of the year. Brodie's just rubbed salt into the wound though with how good he's been since then.
It amazes me how Gold Coast have had all these good players and then they don't play them and then they've left. So I would have no doubt Braden Fiorini's probably going to be on the move at the end of the year, just not getting a game. And I wouldn't be surprised if he moves to another team and goes and does absolutely really like exactly what Will Brodie's done. But Brodie's probably recruit of the year for me.
Yeah, no, he's been fantastic for the Dockers for sure. Caleb Sarong dropped a ton. He's sort of done that infrequently all year.
Great goal as well.
Yeah, it's hard to believe how keen everyone was on him in the preseason. I remember sort of around sort of January, February when we were doing podcasts. Everyone was saying he was going to be, breakout pick of the year, but just hasn't shown it often enough.
Yeah.
And there's a few mouths to feed in that midfield now, but I think at some point he will get there.
Well, Fife didn't even have a CBA, I don't think. I'm pretty sure that he was on zero. Didn't have a centre bounce.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, well, yeah. So, yeah. I mean, it's not really a role thing with Sarong. I think a lot of it is time on ground and probably just a bit of his game style as well. Doesn't get enough easy ball around the ground. It would be my perception of him.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping he kind of learns that as he matures.
Yeah.
Connor Rosie already touched on, but was on, I think, less than 20 at halftime and
I think it was
did
17,
put together
yeah.
a really good second half. So it was nice to see him get to something respectable. Ended up with a 76.
I think Roy had something to do with that. Sent him a bit of a rocket.
I'm sure many people did. Yeah. Yeah. So no, I thought that was really going to hurt me in the last game, but yeah, that second half pushed me up the ranks a bit. So I think if you do have to hold him for one more week, you can. He has shown enough scoring power when he gets going. I can't really explain what happened in the first half, to be honest. Fife you mentioned, I think he's another one of those 30 plus guys now. Role isn't there. I wouldn't be touching him for the rest of the year, probably no matter how cheap he gets. 67 from him. Houston injured. I didn't actually see what happened with that.
That was a late one. I'm pretty sure that from what I saw, that looked to be a calf, obviously, which isn't obviously very good. That could potentially be a forced trade for people, but he wasn't even very good anyway. Again, Houston's been a guy that I owned him last year, and he's a bit of a nightmare to own. He can just go up and down. I know he's been pretty consistent this year, but that would, I think, be a pretty good excuse for people to trade him, I think.
Yeah, I mean, on sort of exposed form this year, he's not going to be a top 6 defender, so it's the right time of the year to be moving those sort of guys on.
Yeah, and then Carl Amon, I know Miller Time jumped on him, I think, this week, so he was obviously disappointed with the 60. And then the other guy that looked really good as well was Jace Burgoyne, Peter Burgoyne's son. He got a 68, so he was a defender mid. I think was he 190k?
I would certainly be rookie price. If he's not 190k, it'd be pretty close for sure.
Okay, no, he went up in price because Lockhart's just lifted, so he's 220 with a break-even -4, so he's potentially an option for.
Yeah, really good bench downgrade option, I think. I mean, just on Amon as well, it's probably a good lesson on not getting sucked into players who have huge games on the back of no role change. So he obviously had three games, maybe 4 in a row where he's dropped huge scores, but we're still getting really limited CBAs. So if you're playing outside that much, it is really hard to keep that sustainable for a long period of time. There's very few players have been able to do that. Kind of an Andrew Gaff and maybe a Mitch Duncan. Those kind of outside mids have been the only guys probably over the last 5-10 years, I reckon, off the top of my head, maybe a Whitfield, but he's playing on a wing, that have been able to score in line with premium mids by doing that. So,
the other one I can probably
player, but he's not in that category.
The other one I can think of, my boy from many years ago, Brent Stanton, who was one of those guys that sort of went into the thing. I love watching him play, but he was sort of a bit like Gaff, had those 60 and 70 games in him. But we do obviously Lockout is lifted. So just a couple of sort of quick notes in terms of prices, and then we'll get into some questions, and then that'll be us done for the night. So Massimo D'Ambrosio went up 52k, people that got him. So he's now 284. So break even -11. So is it too expensive for people that haven't jumped on to be jumping on?
No, it's still under 300k. So if you're really desperate for some bench cover and you've got a lot of red dots there, and you've got the cash to do it, I think you could do much worse. But I think, as you said, is Burgoyne a defender as well?
Defender media 220.
So maybe go him instead and then save the 60k.
Yeah, and then Callum Brown is 261. He's defender 40. He's got -17 break even, so he could be a potential guy that you look at. Jeremy Cameron, as we spoke about before, went up 40k. Kadeem Coleman, he was one play we didn't touch on, but he's been really good last 3 weeks, 90, 94, and 105. So is he a guy that if they'd have him, probably hold him for a couple of weeks, especially with maybe Daniel Rich being out?
Yeah, definitely with Rich being out, to be holding him now. It's been probably a little bit of a slow burn pick, but it's ended up being pretty good. Unfortunately, a lot of people probably would have traded him on his buy, but if you have held, then you may as well keep rolling with him.
Yeah, it would have been fantastic if he played round one, and then he would have been in pretty much everyone's team, but unfortunately he was injured. Libba went up 36k, so he's now 805, so he's expensive now. Cornelio's now 866, went up 34k. Dacos went up 34k, so he's got a break even now back to 58, and he's got North Melbourne this week, so sorry, Nathan, but yeah, Dacos, I think, can have another big game this week. Ware's now gone up 34k as well, so that's him. Then other sort of notable ones. Dawson's now 879, so he's expensive. Sinclair's over 850 again. Laird's now 975. He's 25k away from maybe being the first player this year to go over $1 million. And with Hawthorn this week, I dare say he could potentially push that $1 million mark. Jack Steele, popular target, 877. Petrarca's now over 800k. He's now got a break in of 72. Canelo 866, as I mentioned before. And yeah, Taranto, the final one's 94 break even, 748k. And then Himmelberg as well for you. He's 761 break even and 91. So it's a little bit higher now, but if he's got that role, then he'll be good as well. And then I think the break evens, I think it was literally just those two, Brown and D'Ambrosio, probably the ones. Yeah, if I get it set up here. No, get rid of the top 100 players there. Break even. Yeah, negative 17 for Brown. Franker's obviously not playing. D'Ambrosio negative 11. And then Jace Berg on negative 4. So they're probably the three sort of guys you could look at. All right, so let's get some questions. And then that'll be that. So what have we got? So Shannon Page says, on a more grumpy note, it stinks trades get locked, although none of the four involved have played. Cop the Jackson Donut. How can we get this changed? So I mentioned this on Friday, and DC, I'd love to get sort of your opinion on it. I know Supercoach have got the update trade if your players out. So is that something that you'd be in favour of bringing into fantasy from potentially maybe next year?
Potentially. I mean, usually I find there is a way to fix it. Obviously, the rolling back of your team, you can't do once you've had players play generally, but it's probably more just think about how you're adjusting your team prior to making your trade. So there is that thing that people talk about doing of rolling back your team and then, doing your trades just before the first game. That's probably the best way to go and limit how much, I guess, movement you have in your team, so you don't have these kind of pinch points that stop you from or locking out your trades, I guess, before you're expecting is what you're trying to avoid, isn't it? So,
yeah,
I've never really had the issue personally. So I think usually you can work out a way to avoid it if you kind of think it through properly.
Yeah. Agreed. Shannon Page as well said, great Taranto came through for you this week. Yep, Shannon, very, very happy Taranto finally came good for me. But no, Barnes' question he had before was, can you actually see it on the screen, DC? Is that popping up for you? Yeah, okay. So what's it here? I think my early trade plans are Aaron Hall to Salem or Dacos. I'll bring back in. Would you be bringing Dacos in?
No, I wouldn't. No, not if you're chasing overall rank, because he's still going to be pretty highly owned. So I'd be looking at alternatives.
Yeah, so actually, so that's what Bun's saying. So he would go Hall to a Salem, and then go Rosie to Taranto, or would you just go Hall to Dawson and then just a rookie sort of shuffle?
Yeah, probably the Rosie to Taranto move, although Salem, I mean, that makes you a bit nervous when he's dropped to 60 2 weeks ago, but I do still think he'll be 85, 90 and is pretty good value at his price.
Yeah, no, great. The Dawson move's still good as well. Dawson will be big, but he's getting expensive now. James English, who's currently, he was second overall, 24.76, dropped one spot to third. I don't know how these guys at the top keep scoring 23, 24, 2,500. They've got very good teams. So, I'm still a fair bit away. Jack Mulder, 23.38 with a donut and Dockers captain. Need to get Dawson and or Sinclair this week. If you had to choose one, DC, Dawson or Sinclair, who would you be going?
Both very good. Probably Dawson for me.
Yeah. That's a tough one. I think Dawson with the run. I mean, you mentioned it before with Laird. I think the run is probably the deciding factor. But try and get both in. That's what I'd be doing. Shannon Barron, 23.14 plus 3 O'Brien coming in for Jackson. -3 Haitley for still being in my side due to ruck carnage. That's everyone has had to deal with the ruck carnage this year. Who would have thought the year that I and many other people go set and forget, we get dealt all the forced trades. So that's just how fantasy works sometimes. So Adam Pavdiwala says, who do I trade? So Sicily to anyone, or to Cripps to anyone. Oh, hang on. Sicily to anyone, Cripps to anyone, or Wits to English or Gorn. So what would you be doing out of those three, DC?
I think we spoke about Sicily and Cripps earlier, but yeah, Cripps probably moves on first for me. I think he's further off a top 8 mid than what Sicily is off a top 6 defender. I'd be having a look at English and Gorn for a week when they come back first.
Yep, beautiful. Yeah, I was just about to ask you that. And yeah, so you just answered my question. Beautiful. And then Adam also followed up and said, can I trade Saligo or should I keep him? I think that would just depend if he's on your bench or on your field. If he's on your field, try and upgrade him. But if not, I guess just probably if you need the money, then you can downgrade him. Would you agree?
Yep, agreed. As long as you're making sure you still got some cover, I don't think you want to be going with no cover with still half a dozen rounds to go.
Yeah, no, I agree with that as well. Tate, Yo Bowles, peace and love, mate. I hope you're doing well. Thank you for tuning in. Max Matthews, 22-35, brought in Libba after wanting him for so long. Also, Keys did really well for me. Defense let me down massively. Only Salem scoring 100 plus. Yeah, funny enough, a lot of people's defenses did actually let them down, like Doc, Crisp, Sicily, obviously hard conditions. And a few other people obviously went under. So, yeah, that was definitely. But Libba, definitely a good pick. Brett Johnston, who I knew once upon a time was up the top, but I know he has copped a bit of carnage. Doherty or Whitfield? Any other suggestions for defender that is a bit of a pod? Brought in Hall as an upgrade for Dacos this week, so ranking dropped from 203 to 241 and need to take some risk now. I'm surprised you actually only dropped, 40 spots from going Dacos to Hall, but would you go Doc, Whitfield, or would you get another pod that maybe you can think off the top of your head?
Doc's just really damn expensive. So I think a lot of the teams that already have him have probably had him for a little while and they'll be up the top. So I think Whitfield for me is still the better value and looking as though he's in a role that's going to have him being a comfortably a top 6 defender. So I'd be going for a bit more value in Whit.
Yeah, no, I'd agree as well. He as you mentioned before, 114 in the wet conditions was obviously very, very impressive. So, Charlie says, I need help with my team. Hang on, you got a question here. Do I downgrade Jack Hayes? Well, you still got Jack Hayes injured for season and for a 190k, I'm assuming ruck, and then trade Billy Frampton out for someone like Jordan Dawson. Billy Frampton as well. It's a couple of interesting players that we got, but you'd definitely be ticking off a Jordan Dawson move, I'd imagine.
Yeah, you obviously must have a fair bit of cash in the bank to be able to do that. But yeah, absolutely, you do that.
Yep. Yeah. Tim has asked Sicily, Brody, or Short out next week. So actually, what would you rank those in terms of probably in luxury trades, priority trade outs?
Well, it's really tough. I think they're all around the same sort of mark, to be honest. Probably one of the worst form, I would say, is almost Short. So yeah, probably Short or Sicily. I think Brody is still close enough to being a top 6 forward on current form. So, yeah, flip a coin between Short and Sicily.
Yeah. I'd almost lean towards trade Short first just because Sicily's got those 3 easy matchups. But yeah, as DC said, flip a coin. Jack Mulder, hey guys, after Doherty, who are the must-have defenders for the remaining games of the season? Dawson, Sinclair, Chris, Whitfield, cheers. Obviously, we touched on Dawson and Sinclair as those probably 2 that you want. I would imagine what you think Whitfield's probably a top 6 defender on form?
Yeah, I think so. In that role, I would expect him to be, yeah.
Yeah, and then is there any, is Chris probably a guy that you'd probably want to have for the rest of the year? And is there any other guys that you probably can think of?
If you don't have Crisp, I wouldn't be chasing him. I don't think he's going to absolutely kill you on ceiling scores. He'll probably just end up being his sort of consistent 80 to 110 kind of self. He's had a couple of down weeks in a row, so I think you just got to hope that he drops a few quieter ones from now to the end of the year as well. So I wouldn't be chasing him, but I'd definitely still hold to him if you've got him.
Yeah, he dropped another 30k and he's still got to break even to 130. So he's going to be under, more than likely, he'll be under 800k next week. Robbie G says, I'm still paying up for Laird, to be honest. If you've got the money there, I guess if you've got no rookies on on your field, then yeah, go ahead. This is the fun part of the season when we're trying to upgrade, obviously, but we have had a lot of carnage over the last couple of weeks to not be able to upgrade. Shannon Barron, Haitley to Dawson, steal or save money and go Whitfield. So I think you said would you go Whitfield over Dawson?
Well, what's the price difference there? It's probably
so Dawson is 879, Whitfield 770. Oh, literally exactly 100K.
Yeah, I think for the 100K difference, I'd be going Whitfield, but Dawson's been awesome. So probably Whitfield.
Steele. What about Steele?
Yeah,
Whitfield?
I'd go Steele probably over both. I think Steele, showed last year that potentially he can be the highest scoring player in the game. And if he manages to do that from now to the end of the year, then you're going to want to get him. And I don't think he's going to get much cheaper than what he is.
No. And I was going to mention what was Steele. I remember he had a tackle, like literally with 2 seconds to go, and the siren went as he tackled and it counted. He's just an absolute blessing to watch him in your team. Final 2 questions here. Charlie Boherchick, I hope I've said that correctly. Do I down? Oh no, that's the same question. We answered that before. So yeah, there you go. So Charlie, we did answer that before. And then the final one from Charlie again. Hey guys, what are your thoughts on Dylan Moore from Hawthorn?
He was fantastic particularly to start the season, probably the first 6 or 8 weeks, but I couldn't bring him in now.
No. It's as we've mentioned a couple of times. It is trying to get those best 22 or close enough to those players. And he's gone 56, 68, 89, 105, 83 in his last 5. So probably not a guy that I'd be looking at bringing in. So there you go. But no, so thank you everyone for tuning in anyway. Gone for just a bit over an hour. But thank you obviously very much, DC, for jumping on. What are your early, obviously lockouts just lived, so you haven't probably had enough time to look at what you're doing, but any sort of thoughts on who you're looking at targeting and who you're looking at potentially getting rid of this week?
Yeah, I mean, Hall will obviously have to go. Probably the other candidate for me to move on would be a Rosie, but I might end up resisting the temptation and just try and take Hall up to a premium mid. So I touched on earlier that I can move Dacos back into D6 and then take Hall up probably to a steal, but could be an Oliver or someone like that as well. So that's a fairly straightforward move for me. Yeah, thanks for having me on, mate. Appreciate it.
Beautiful. Actually, James has just said, are we worried about Darcy this week against the St. Rucks?
I think he'll hold his own. It's not as though he's going to get bullied around. So I think he'll be fine. Maybe not quite the ceiling score we saw this week from him.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. So, as I said, thank you very much, DC. I would imagine everyone here does, if they're following me, they definitely follow you and the boys at Hatchat. But if not, where can they find you on the socials and where can they find the podcast?
Yep, so you can find me at DC Caterpillars. The podcast is at Hatchat AFL. We're on Facebook as well. There's a Facebook page, which is public, and you can also join the private group, which some people may not be in. We just ticked over 2,000 members in that group, so there's a good little community going there. And then the podcast is on Apple and Spotify.
Yep, and then also as well, don't forget on Wednesday night, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, there's the Twitter Spaces, so that's always good fun as well to listen to. So also, thank you for everyone for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed, we are now 478, 22 away from 500. So if we can get there before the end of the season, that'd be fantastic. And also like the video and just go for all the socials and stuff. And I'll be back on Wednesday night for the Twitter Spaces as normal. So yes, again, thank you very much, DC, for jumping on. I really do appreciate it. And we'll see everyone on the next one. So we're out. Cheers.